But good morning, and sorry for the delay in starting this. My name is Jayant Bhandari, and I've been hosting this seminar for the last 4 years, and I'm very grateful for a lot of people who have flown in from different places, Australia, Singapore, New York, all the way just for this seminar. So I'm very grateful and flattered that so many people are here. I want to welcome you. Given the fact that I was stopped 2 days back by the police for no good reason to extract $167, I increasingly I'm convinced that liberty is taking a back seat in this society. Despite this, I don't think that the fountainhead of our problems is the state. The fountainhead is the society, the culture that is changing. The real problem is within the minds of the society, and as Rick Rule says, it is between our 2 ears. In my view, as people become increasingly characterless and lacking in self-responsibility, within their own minds they create chains and limitations for themselves. And they act in ways which allow sociopaths to rise up in the society. And then these sociopaths, of course, dictate and rule us. In my view, it is not working through the political system that we can bring a change. It is by working within our own minds that we can bring a change. It's not the visible change that restrict us, it's the invisible change of our indoctrination that restrict us more. Those people who come and speak at this seminar are icons of freedom. And that's something they have to be invited to come to this seminar. These are the people who accept personal responsibility. They don't wallow in their problems, they look for solutions. And these are the people who have actually turned the predicament to their advantage. They live a good and proud life. And that is the theme of this seminar. I would like to invite our first speaker, Doug French. Doug is senior editor of Laissez Faire books. Doug is a major supporter of the Mises Institute and has earlier served as its president. To me, Mises.org and LewRockwell.com provided a daily dose of common sense and sanity. Doug worked as a banker during the housing boom. He experienced firsthand how people's wrong assumptions destroyed their lives, how decisions based on herd mentality resulted in millions struggling with underwater homes, underwater loans, and underwater investment portfolios. His latest book is Failure of Common Knowledge. Is that your latest book, Doug? Yeah. And the lesson of the book is you have to think for yourself to avoid the traps that governments and special interests have set up at every turn for you. You have to subject everything to critical standards of rationality and economic knowledge. I would like to invite Doug French to speak.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be in Vancouver. It's a wonderful city. I was met at the border by a fine young man in a little glass container, I guess. Why he felt like he needed to interrogate me in what looked to be a bulletproof vest seemed odd to me. And every once in a while you take the wrong line. You've got a number of lines you can pick through. You're trying to get across the border, and for whatever reason I picked the slowest line, and I couldn't really figure out why until I got before this young man. And I had put on my declaration that I was here on business, and of course he had to ask what kind of business I was on. And I said, well, I'm giving a couple of talks. And he said, what kind of talks are you giving? I had already thought this had gone a little too far, but I said, well, one is on a talk I gave yesterday, the failure of quantitative easing from from John Law to Ben Bernanke. That really didn't pique his interest. But then I said I'm also giving a talk on sociopaths versus freedom. This he was very interested in. And he said, why don't you tell me about this speech? And all of a sudden, the woman who was checking passports next to me, she becomes interested. The people who are trying to get through the line, they become interested. And I tried to launch into a little bit of it. And I think about the time I hit something about Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. I had tired him out, and he finally let me go. But anyway, for you Canadians, believe me, your borders are extremely safe. No crazy nuts are going to get through here without, you know, some vigorous questioning. So I'm proof of that. You know, I have been at a couple of libertarian functions lately, and it kind of leads into what I want to talk about today. And the first one is PorcFest. Has anybody been to PorcFest in this crowd? It is a, this is held in the middle of New Hampshire. It's put on by the Free States Project, where in New Hampshire they're trying to get as many libertarians to move to New Hampshire to try to change that state. It's really, I went up there with some trepidation, I'll be honest, because I looked at things you should know for PorcFest. They have the website. And the first thing they said is you should bring very heavy boots so that you can walk around in the mud. As a speaker, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be speaking out in a pasture or something like that. But it didn't quite work out that way. It was a great group of people, but I would say when we drove into the lot at the campground where this is held, there were probably about 12 cars in the lot. And I've never seen anything quite like this. All 12 cars had bumper stickers, and all 12 cars had Ron Paul for president bumper stickers. I don't think I've ever seen that, and it didn't make me happy, actually. I thought I was going to somewhere where we had a bunch of hardcore anarchists, where we were going to have people carrying firearms, that we were going to have people smoking illegal substances, dealing in Bitcoin and silver, serving omelets dripping with greasy bacon that an inspector had never seen or checked, or so on. That's what I thought, but yet I see that everybody was placing their hopes for freedom, not on their personal activities, but they were placing their hopes on bumper stickers for their favorite guy. And of course that was Ron. I like Ron, I know Ron. I think probably most people in the audience, at least the Americans, are in favor of Ron. By the way, I should say, I think there's these books on the table by Walter Block. And it says yes to Ron Paul and liberty. This speech is essentially the anti-yes to Ron Paul and liberty speech. But so when Walter speaks later in the afternoon, and I know Walter, he is going to rip me apart. So you can just, you can look forward to that. You're already planning your remarks. It just never fails. I always set up Walter, and he'll come up here and say, I need to say something about my good friend Douglas French. He's made a number of mistakes, and let me point them out. So the next place I went was Las Vegas, my old hometown, and Giant was kind enough to tell you my checkered past as a banker. And how I not only had you know, I had written a thesis under Murray Rothbard about speculative bubbles, so I knew something about it, and I was continually writing columns for LouRockwell.com questioning the housing bubble that was occurring in Las Vegas during the mid-2000s. And, but I worked for a bank, and I was a real estate lender, and I did my job, and of course when the bank began to circle the drain, and I was fired, and then the bank you know, failed, and now I get to sit through depositions, and you know, I have a couple of attorneys getting very rich off the case. So I would just say, if anybody aspires to be a banker in this room, never send an email to anyone, because if you think it will be forgotten, suddenly it will be Exhibit 248 during some deposition somewhere. Federal regulators do not believe that market forces cause bank failures. They believe that it was people like me who obviously knew. I wrote a thesis about this, for crying out loud. I should have known that the market was going to crash, and I should have done something about it. So, but anyway, I was back in Vegas, and really the focus for Freedom Fest, and the focus of Freedom Fest, again, was not necessarily, it was on freedom, but it was on Rand Paul. Rand Paul, everybody was gushing about, and he is our new hope for liberty. So, and I was thinking immediately that libertarians are so cheap, they will probably just scratch out the name on those bumper stickers. They will scratch out Ron and just write in Rand with a Sharpie, and then go on, and that's their way to. What's that?
You don't have to scratch out, just a little A and then put in the D.
I hadn't thought that through as well. If I get stuck again during this talk, please pay attention to what the heck I'm doing. Anyway, you know, it's always good to lead off a speech with a quote from H.L. Mencken, who described politicians, men who at some time or another have compromised with their honor, either swallowing their convictions or by whooping for what they believe to be untrue. Vanity remains to him, but not pride. And I think the sage of Baltimore had it correct, that to be elected and stay elected in American politics, I don't know how it is in Canada, but I assume it's the same way, to any full-time position requires the suspension of any ethics or good sense that a person may possess. At this point, I am just compelled to throw in two words at you: Anthony Weiner. The gift that absolutely keeps on giving. I said the other night during a panel, this guy is really starting to grow on me. And I cannot, I just really want a New York that has Anthony Weiner at the controls, and then in the very next office, Elliot Spitzer. I think this is wonderful. But even those who begin their political careers, they have the best intentions, and we know who they are. I mean, certainly Ron has the best intentions, Ron Paul and Rand Paul and many others were up there. They have measurable abilities that would make them successful in any field. But they soon realize that those skills required to succeed in politics are not the skills that are required outside of politics. Is that the Canadian government? Is that
Still the U.S.
I thought they turned that off on Saturdays. Anyway, Lew Rockwell explains that while competition in the marketplace improves quality, competition in politics does just the opposite. The only improvements that take place is in the process of doing bad things. There is progress in lying and cheating and manipulating and stealing and killing. The price of political services is constantly increasing, whether in tax dollars paid or the bribes owed for protection. also known as campaign contributions. There's no obsolescence planned or otherwise. And there was an Austrian economist who wrote about this a long time ago, a book that I think many of you have probably read, The Road to Serfdom. F.A. Hayek said that in politics, the worst rise to the top. And he outlined 3 reasons why. First, Hayek writes at the point that people of higher intelligence have different tastes and views. So he says we have to descend to the regions of lower moral and intellectual standards where the more primitive instincts prevail. And that's to gain a uniformity of opinion. Second, those on top gain the support of the docile and the gullible, who are ready to accept whatever values and ideology that is drummed into them. And totalitarians depend upon those who are guided by their passions and emotions rather than on critical thinking. And finally, leaders don't promote a positive agenda, but a negative one of hating an enemy and envy of the wealthy. That doesn't happen in Canada, though, does it? To appeal to the masses, leaders preach an us versus them program. Advancement with this totalitarian group or party depends largely on a willingness to do immoral things. Hayek explains the principle that the end justifies the means, which in individualist ethics is regarded as the denial of all morals. In collectivist ethics becomes necessary to the supreme rule. I would urge anyone to, if you want to see an illustration of this, to watch a program called The House of Cards on Netflix, or possibly The Borgias is how this was done in the Vatican way back when. Now, those wishing to get elected and stay elected, they must be prepared to break every moral rule they ever have known, that is, if the ends justify it. Frank Knight, who's a famous economist, notes that those in authority would have to do these things whether they wanted to or not. And the probability of the people in power being individuals who would dislike the possession and exercise of power is on a level with the probability that an extremely tender-hearted person would get the job of whipping master in a slave plantation. So I think that what we're driving to here is that politics attracts a certain kind of people. You know, Mencken said it's a psychic impossibility for a gentleman to hold office under the federal union. Democracy makes it impossible for the demagogue to inflame the childish imagination of the masses by virtue. Makes it possible for the demagogue to inflame the childish imagination of the masses by virtue of his talent for nonsense. The king can do the same in a monarchy, but only by virtue of his birth. Unfortunately, in the case of a democracy, anyone who can manage to get elected can do these things. You know, Hans Hoppe has written an extraordinary book called Democracy, the God That Failed. And he points out that private property, production, voluntary exchange, these are the ultimate sources of human civilization. It's natural order that Hoppe notes must be maintained by a natural elite, which would come by these positions of natural authority, not by the election, as in the case of democracy, or by birth in the case of a monarchy, but by their superior achievements of wealth, wisdom, bravery, or the combination thereof. This is just the opposite of what Mencken and Rockwell describe in a democracy. I think we can think today of, in this room, who would be the natural elite. It would be Giant, of course, probably Doug Casey, Rick Rule. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have those guys in charge? That would be something, huh? So, not that he wants to be in charge. So it's due to the superior achievements, actually, of wealth and wisdom and bravery that these individuals come to possess this natural authority. And their opinions and their judgments enjoy this widespread respect. People would come to them to settle disputes. They would be the wise men and the wise women of the local villages, which is what used to take place. They'd have long-established records of fairness. These would be passed down through families, and this is how civil justice would be handled in this kind of manner. Now, on the other hand, democracy affords the opportunity for anyone to pursue politics as a career. There's no need for the masses to recognize a person as wise or successful, as Hoppe's natural order would require. You know, there was the great American comedian Bob Hope, who actually was born in England. And he said, I left England at the age of 4 when I found out I couldn't be king. And so, and maybe he knows he can't have Prince Charles' job, that Sir Richard Branson, who's been knighted for service to entrepreneurship, actually sticks to business, thanks goodness, and reports owns 360 different companies. But unfortunately, we're stuck with democracy. Since World War II, or actually World War I, democracy is viewed as the only legitimate government. And thus, more and more people, more and more successful people in business, billionaires, multimillionaires, have become interested in politics. Remember Ross Perot? Michael Bloomberg, he of the 16-ounce soda, Carly Fiorina, Meg Whitman, John Corzine, you know, great man, ran for office. Who knows what will happen with him? And of course, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, George Soros, they haven't run for office directly, but they've thrown millions and millions of people or money at particular causes. I'd have to throw Sheldon Adelson in that. Is this on tape? Sheldon is very litigious. So, but he's also thrown hundreds of millions of dollars in political campaigns. Would it be better that they're doing this? Or maybe they should stick to what they do best, which is creating capital, creating wealth, creating jobs. But again, they've been browbeaten or into donating money, probably wasting money, as their cases made the case, on charitable endeavors. So there have been many politicians who pursue elected office for the money, but many elected officials, they're already wealthy. In fact, a third of all the members in the Senate are millionaires. A quarter of all the House members are already millionaires. So why do they run for office? Charles Derber describes it. He wrote a book called The Pursuit of Attention, Power and Ego in Everyday Life. And he said, since Caesar and Napoleon have been, politicians since Caesar and Napoleon have been driven by an overweening egos and an insatiable hunger for public adulation. So I got to thinking about this, and I was wondering about the work of psychologist Abraham Maslow. And anybody who knows Maslow, he's a big lefty and so on. So but let's not throw him out immediately for that. But he had created something that I think we must all be, if you went to college, you remember the Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. And of course, the bottom of Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs is the physiological needs. First, we need to take care of breathing and food and water and sleep and sex and those kind of things. And then safety is the next tranche of the pyramid: security, body, employment, then love and belonging, sexual intimacy. And then, of course, next is esteem. self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, respect by others. And then there's that very top of Maslow's pyramid, which is morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, acceptance of the facts. That is when you become a self-actualized person. So Maslow's view was you continually, as you satisfy your needs, you work up the pyramid. So he considered the first 4 needs as deficit needs. And if a person is lacking, there's a motivation to fill those needs. Once those particular needs are filled, the motivation abates. This is, and then when you get to self-actualization, actually that need is never satisfied. He referred to it as the being need. The need to be all you can be. So thus, humans continually drive to satisfy these needs. Maslow pointed out that only 2% of people ever become self-actualized. And of course, humans achieve different levels. Some people just get to that first level, they manage to get themselves fed, so on and so forth. Next is safety, so on and so forth. And certain people move beyond that. He said that he actually did a study of many famous folks, and he studied some not so famous folks, and he found out that the self-actualizers, the people that reached the top, had strong ethics, a self-deprecating sense of humor, humility, a respect for others, resistance to enculturation, enjoyment of autonomy and solitude instead of shallow relationships with many people. They believe the ends do not justify the means, and that the means can be ends in themselves. So what we can see very readily is that Maslow's self-actualizers have nothing in common with politicians in a democracy, but closely fit the profile that Hoppe describes as the natural elite that would lead in a natural order. But when we step down from the top of the pyramid, we find this need for esteem. And Maslow actually described 2 types of esteem needs according to one of his followers, Dr. George Murray, a lower esteem need and a higher esteem. While the higher form of esteem calls for a healthy attributes such as freedom, independence, confidence, and achievement, the lower form is, quote, the need for the respect of others, the need for status, fame, glory, recognition, attention, reputation, appreciation, dignity, and even dominance. The negative version of these needs is low self-esteem and inferiority complexes. Maslow felt that this researcher was really onto something, and this need for esteem is actually the roots of many, if not all, of our psychological problems. That is where our politicians are stuck. And because democracy is open to any and all who can get themselves elected, even through connections or personality or personal wealth, it's the social system where leadership positions can essentially become a hotbed for sociopaths. Maslow's self-actualizing man, Hoppe's natural elite, won't have any interest in politics. But those stuck with the need for esteem are drawn to politics like flies to, certain clumps in a pasture, so to speak. Now, even religious philosophers recognize the shortcomings of those in power. St. Augustine wrote about this, theory of the just war. He said that as a result of Adam's fall, pride and vanity, and libido domini, the lust for domination that entices men toward waging wars and committing all manners of violence. And some of you will remember, because I think you might have been in the room at Mises University a few years ago, Judge Andrew Napolitano made the point that libido demeaning is the thing in human nature that attracts people to government. In fact, that they may dominate their fellow man. The same good men that created and founded the United States government, on the other hand, wrote laws as repugnant as the Alien and Sedition Acts. Hoppe recognized that natural elites have responsibilities that extend far beyond themselves and their families. The most successful they are, the more successful they are as businessmen and professionals, and the more others recognize them as successful, the more important it is that they set an example. They strive to live up to the highest standards of ethical conduct. This means accepting as their duty, indeed their noble duty, to support openly and proudly and as generously as they possibly can to these values that have made them successful. And in return, they receive intellectual inspiration and nourishment and strength. On the other hand, in democracy, politicians seeking acclaim for anything they do, they continually take credit for policies that they say have made our lives better, when in fact these interventions only make our lives worse. There's no need to list the names of politicians who've committed crimes or ethics violations. We would be here all day just mentioning that list. So, with leadership in such dysfunctional hands, it's no wonder that in comparison to the 19th century, the cognitive prowess of the political and intellectual elites and the quality of public education have declined. That's what Hoppe says in his book Democracy. And the rates of crime, structural unemployment, welfare dependency, negligence, recklessness, incivility, psychopathy, hedonism, they've all increased during this time. And again, a result of who is being attracted to democracy. So while the electorate recognizes that they're electing at best incompetence and at worst crooks, there's this constant naive pro-democracy mantra, and we hear it every cycle. We just need to elect the right people. But the right people aren't and won't be running for office. Instead, we will continue to have, in the words of H.L. Mencken, the average American legislature, who is not only an ass, but also an oblique, sinister, depraved, and knavish fellow. Now I want to throw out, there's actually in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, there's been some work, certain psychopathic traits may be like a double-edged sword, the study found. And it said in a written statement, fearless dominance, for example, may contribute to reckless criminality and violence or to skillful leadership in the face of crisis. Politicians are more likely than people in the general population to be sociopaths. Clinical psychologist Martha Stout said. I think you'll find no expert in the field of psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder, who would dispute this, that a small minority of human beings literally have no conscience was and is a bitter pill for our society to swallow. But it does explain a great many things, shameless, deceitful, political behavior being one. Superficially charming psychopaths tend to make good first impressions on others and often strike observers as remarkably normal, yet they are self-centered, dishonest, and undependable, and at times they engage in irresponsible behavior for no apparent reason and other than the sheer fun of it. Psychopaths routinely offer excuses for their reckless and often outrageous action, placing blame on others instead. Stout says, as it turns out, the majority of psychopaths never kill anyone with their own hands, nor do they live in prison. A smart psychopath can avoid prison and find other, less conspicuous ways to satisfy his or her lust for dominating and controlling others. And what better way than through politics and big business to do that? She goes on, I think most experts would agree that Hitler, Pol Pot, and others were sociopaths. But a leader certainly does not have to be an infamous dictator to be sociopathic. In fact, she said sociopaths often are extremely charismatic. They may not feel higher emotions like love and guilt. They may not have actual consciousness, but they study those of us who do, and they simply pretend to be what they need to be. Jim Corey is Vice President of the National Associations of Chief of Police, which may in fact mean he's a sociopath himself, but I don't know if I can say that. He actually has assembled traits such as superficial charm, exaggerated sense of self-worth, glibness, lying, lack of remorse, and manipulation of others. These traits, Corey points out in his analysis, are common to two different types of groups. Sociopathic serial killers and politicians. He adds, while many political leaders will deny the assessment regarding their similarities with serial killers and other career criminals, it is part of psychopathic profile that may be used in assessing the behaviors of many others, lawmakers and government. So, I want to throw just one more thing out there, you know, I think there's always the belief that we have that if we can elect the right guy, the right woman, things will change. But I want to think about something that probably a lot of people in this room care about, and that is the sound money movement. We would all like our money to be in sounder condition. And what Ron Paul has done is fought forever to educate the masses on the gold standard and what the Fed has done for his money, and what he's fought continually is this valiant fight to audit the Federal Reserve. We're going to audit the Federal Reserve, and that is how, now I don't know what's supposed to happen after we audit the Federal Reserve, and I don't know who would be auditing, and depending on what would come from that audit, what would happen, but that is the first step. It hasn't been accomplished yet. It's been taking years to do it. And thus you can see that the political process with all these sociopaths take a long, long time to accomplish what has essentially been nothing in terms of making our money sounder. On the other hand, a gentleman by the name, or an anonymous person by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, 2008, created something called Bitcoin. And he didn't choose a political way of doing things. He just created something that is limited in supply and created a technologically sound way to create a sound money. I would contend that Satoshi, whoever he, she, or they may be, is the elite, and that they are winning over the political sociopaths. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
Oh, really? I was trying to keep that from happening.
That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question.
And
you see in your ideal society? It's not democracy, it's not dictatorship, it's not socialism. What is it?
I think it would be just self-rule, and I think how that would manifest itself is that we might have some sort of governance happen within individual neighborhoods, where you know your neighbors, you know the people around you, maybe you know people online, and make decisions to affect your local communities. But I think top-down, being dictated from the top down by governments far, far away, obviously has led to, a certain form of tyranny. So, yeah, in my perfect world, which will never, by the way, happen. But I do think through technology that a lot of this can happen. I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a gathering like this was very hard to put together. I remember back in the days, and Walter would certainly remember back in the days when the Mises Institute would advertise online, where we would have a conference and 20 people would show up, or 25 people. There was the day when, the entire libertarian movement could fit in Murray Rothbard's living room. We've come a long, long way, and it's not the time to despair. But it's not the time to declare victory and go home either. But technology, there is a race between technology and government, and I believe if you believe in the market and you believe in the force of human ideas, ultimately those ideas are going to win, and I think that's going to drive, instead of the Charles Schumers and whoever else is up there, the Barney Franks and the Chris Dodds and those sorts of guys. I think everybody knows local politicians, and you know that they're much more responsive to you when they know you, when they see you eating breakfast or having coffee or whatever. These are generally normal people who want to do well. They only go to Washington when they become very, very good at stealing. And a guy like Harry Reid in the U.S. Senate is an extraordinary thief, and that's how he's risen that far. But people who in Las Vegas only get to be Clark County commissioners generally are so clumsy they eventually go to jail. So not many congressmen in Washington or your equivalent here are sent away, but we just need to, these political subdivisions need to become smaller and smaller and smaller. And whether it's the idea of Grover Norquist that government can become small enough where you can drown it in a bathtub, or whether it's the idea that government can be housed in a double-wide trailer. I don't know what that is. I prefer no government at all, and that's what I would argue for, but I realize I'm pulling on the very far end of the rope, but any pulling that we have in that direction, I think it's a positive.
Just one more question.
That's really the question.
Here it comes. I don't think you're on till the 7th.
That's why I'm sleeping now. I got a nip of evil in the bud. It seems to me that the only way we're going to get liberty is to convert a lot of people to libertarianism. And who has converted more people to liberty than Ron Paul? Murray Rothbard used to say that every 4 years in the U.S., and I guess roughly every 4 years in Canada, people pay attention to politics, and we might as well get our war in as well. Ron Paul is probably responsible for the fact that we are now gigantic. Now, in this book, what I do is I criticize Wendy McElroy and Stephen Kinsella because they, Stephen Molyneux, because they publicly criticized Ron Paul, and Ron's my man, and anyone who criticizes Ron Paul is going to get it from me. Doug French hadn't publicly criticize Ron, otherwise they can get chapter in this book on him as well.
It's coming though, isn't it?
I distributed these books just to take a peek at them, but they're $20 if you're interested in Ron. I've got some more over here. Doug's speech was very entertaining as usual, but you know the implication is that Ron Paul's a sociopath, and he made that claim, and I agree with him that most politicians are sociopaths and evil and all. But Ron Paul is, if the opposite of sociopath is saint, Ron is a lot closer to sainthood than he is to sociopathy. So I really don't see this criticism on the part of libertarians, because Ron is creating libertarians en masse, and the only hope that we have is to get lots of libertarians, and Ron is doing that. It seems like biting the hand that feeds us, biting the person who is responsible with Ayn Rand perhaps for creating more libertarians than anyone else. I mean, Mises and Rothbard and others have done intellectual stuff, but Ron Paul, wherever he goes, he gets 20,000 people. And whenever I give lectures and I ask people, how do you come to be here? How did you get converted to libertarianism? Invariably, the majority will raise their hand and say it's Ron Paul. So it seems to me highly problematic to think of Ron Paul as a detriment to libertarianism, and certainly to put the word sociopath and Ron Paul in the same sentence is preposterous.
Well, I didn't put them in the same sentence, but I did put it in the same speech, so I'll do that. I'm glad I could be your straight man. Is that it, or is Walter on now? No.